Welcome to our Spring 2012 Convocation. We have a full agenda with two programs, a two-pronged program, one entitled Pathways and Pathways and Pathways with a subtitle, and a second, a prescription for student success. And I want to thank Provost Griffith and Vice President Walker Johnson for leading these efforts. I'm delighted to welcome you to the spring semester, a full month in. You can probably tell me some good stories of what's happening in the classroom and the labs. And I do want to just report that we met our enrollment goal. In fact, we surpassed it possibly by about a 1% or 2% number. And our students, are really being more full-time than part-time, as some of you might remember in the older days. So we really are seeing students participating more fully in the life of the college, both at the point of courses as well as co-curricular. Second, however, I do want to let you know that we continue to be in fairly constrained budget times. And I'm not going to take time out of today's presentation to talk more about the budget, but I'm going to ask you to continue to read my quarterly updates. The last one was published on December 21st. It's still up on the web, so take a look at it. The next one will come out sometime about mid to late March and will give us a sense as to how we might close the year. I do want to congratulate folk who have been active on the accreditation front. External accreditation has been granted to our nursing program, to our clinical lab science program, and to our physician's assistance program. Applause, applause, applause. Our teacher education program is in the final throes of preparing their report, and they look forward to welcoming the external NCATE accreditors in April. And I do know that they have been given a very strong assist by our new dean, Dean Clark, as they cross this finish line. So we wish them the best as they come to this closure. I do know, of course, that social work, you're probably more at the front end than you are at the middle or end, but I'm sure, too, that you will get able assistance from Dean Clark. And our periodic review report is moving apace under the able leadership of our co-chairs, Acker, Chirico, and Paglione. And I do ask that as they continue their work, which will take them into 2013, that is not due until June, that you do give them your full support. You do give them and the members of the committee your full support. And one of the ways you can do so is by attending a town hall meeting, which we're now scheduling on April 19th. The date might change depending on who's around, but that's the date we are holding now for a town hall meeting, so you can get an update on where we are with our periodic review report. And for those of you who might be new to York, every 10 years we do a middle states review. We do a full review. Every 5 years, we do a briefer reflective review based upon the recommendations that we had made back on our 10-year review. I also want to congratulate our faculty and staff who have achieved new success in their professional lives. I want to welcome a few new people here at York, not too many this year because we are in somewhat constrained times. Are there any new faculty in the house? I know we had a couple of subs this spring and someone who has been, yes, would you just stand, please? And I know, Mr. Slosky, are you here? New staff, yes, okay, good. We also have someone from the biology department, Dr. Silberklang, are you here? Is he here? No. Well, we just want to say welcome to the new members of the college community. I want to congratulate those of you who have made strides in your professional life. And I want to particularly congratulate Dr. Parmet on his new book, Town and Gown, The Fight for Social Justice, Urban Rebirth and Higher Education, that chronicles York's early years. Should you in the audience want to learn more about that particular work, not only can you buy the book and read it, yes, good plug, but you can also join us this evening at the Greater Jamaica Development Corp., which is presenting a book presentation where Dr. Parmet will be featured, and there'll be a small panel presentation that's being held in the dining room at 4:30 today. Our students continue to make us proud, as was evidenced last Saturday when Yisa Ramallah, class of 2006, was recognized as CUNY's first Decade of the Science Scholar and was presented with the award by the Chancellor at the annual legislative lunch hosted by CUNY in Albany during the caucus weekend. As you will see from the photos, he was there in front of a jam-packed crowd of CUNY students and legislators, and it was there that Yisa made a presentation entitled From the Farm to Optical Tornadoes, My Path Through the STEM Disciplines. He inspired other CUNY students to pursue their dream. Yisa was mentored by, among others, Dr. Farley Moyer, he remembers that first class, Farley, Dr. Larry Johnson of the chemistry department, and also Dr. Greg Budis, who is no longer at the college but is at Brooklyn College, who served as a mentor for him. And Yisa will receive his PhD in applied physics. He picked up along the way a master's in engineering from the University of Michigan, and he expects to achieve that PhD in spring of this year. He is the fulfillment of our mission that York enables students to grow as passionate, engaged learners with the confidence to realize their intellectual and human potential as individuals and citizens. We're proud of their work. We're proud of your work. Let's continue our program as we try to help students achieve their full potential. And so let me ask Provost Griffith to come to the microphone to lead us through this second part of our program. Again, welcome. All the best for the semester.
Thank you, President Keyes. I just want to pick up on one aspect of something that President Keyes said, and that is to congratulate not only Bob, but all our other faculty who recently had books, whether edited or authored or co-edited. I had an opportunity last December 13, I think, to host a small intellectual party, and it was wonderful to see not only, actually it was one of my requirements for the party, that their students, the students and the professors who had books were there to help celebrate what their faculty, our faculty accomplished. So round of applause for all of our faculty who have got publications. You know, even new colleagues like Claudette, she's over there, will come to realize that the Pathways project on which we're embarked is a transformational project, transformational for York, transformational for CUNY. And like all transformational projects, there are going to be controversies, there are going to be bumps in the road, and part of what we all need to do, particularly because it's a transformational project, we need to have the conversations that allow us to dispel the myths and deal with the rumors about it. And so part of what we're doing this afternoon is continuing the conversation about the Pathways project, enabling us to not only hear from some of the colleagues who are in the leadership within York and at CUNY on the Pathways, but giving an opportunity for us to have questions answered of those colleagues. We put together a little packet, and I'm hoping you get a chance later on to peruse the packet, and we're going to upload the PDF version of it on the Provost website. So if you're not able to at home access your physical copy, please feel free to access the PDF as of tomorrow and encourage all the colleagues to do so. I'm going to invite the members of the panel, Dean Melitis, Dr. Swoboda, Dr. Chirico, Professor Clovey, to join us up here. And while they come, I want to tell you, maybe because there's a curiosity about why these colleagues. These colleagues on the panel are among our leaders on the Pathways project within CUNY. Dean Melitis is our campus liaison. We have 3 members of our Pathways working group, one of whom is absent today. Bill DeValle is absent. But Howard and Deb are the York representatives on the Pathways Task Force Working Committee, largely because there are so many transfer students with majors, some of which are significant in moving students between community college and senior college. The Chancellery decided to focus, among other things, in the first round on what they call the majors. When we looked at the majors that fit the parameters of what CUNY wanted to go on the majors front, we found that psychology, business and economics, and accounting fit those criteria. And so we have Robert Clovey doing double duty, crossing over not only accounting and finance, but also business and economics. You know, some of you might recall that that was one department years ago. And so Robert is helping set the standards, and you'll hear more from him and Deb later on, while Donna is working on the psychology. Before I invite Dean Melitis first to talk a little bit about the implementation journey and the implementation expectations, I want to take a moment, especially because we've got new colleagues joining us, to help understand what might be dubbed the why of Pathways. And I like to frame the answer to the why by saying that the why is driven by several imperatives. One imperative is an educational imperative, one imperative is an economic imperative, and one is a political imperative. So let me take 1 minute to talk about each of those. The educational imperative has to do with the fact that so many of our senior college students come as transfer students. And when you get a chance and you look at page 8 of your handout, you'll see that not only is that true for York, but it is true for every senior college. The preponderant number of students coming into college at the senior level come from community colleges or come from other senior colleges. But the reality has been for a long time, for decades actually, those transfer students have had significant difficulty not only in getting in, but in completing. And part of that difficulty has had to do with the nature of the gen ed design at the various colleges. And if you look at page 1 of your handout, you'll see, even if only for the constellation of the senior colleges, what the disparity across CUNY of the gen ed is all about. The number of credits differ from place to place. At the high end, it's 60 at Baruch. Here it is 42 to 51. And so part of the difficulty of the students not only getting in, but succeeding, sometimes leading them to have significant excess credits. As high as 178 credits sometimes students have, whereas all they need is 120. Now, the university recognizes that the Pathways Initiative is not the only way to manage or to deal with this challenge, but it is a critical part of the stumbling block of the obstacles to our students. But there is an economic imperative. And when you take a look at page 7, you'll see even if only for the community colleges, what is true for both the community colleges and the senior colleges. For the last several years, we've had to endure budget cuts. But there is an interesting reality of what happens when states and cities are cutting budgets. They also increase their scrutiny. They also increase their accountability requests. And so the city council, which fundamentally funds community colleges, and the state, which fundamentally funds the senior college, both have been asking, why are our students not graduating earlier? Why is it taking so long and so much difficulty for students to get in to CUNY College? The irony being that sometimes students moving from one community college are able to get into a private university easier than to get into a CUNY senior college. And so that economic imperative of the budget cuts and having to respond to the pressures from the City Council held several hearings because they wanted to know what's the return on the investment. There's an economic imperative for us to show that the investment both the state and the City Council are making in CUNY, that investment is having a good return. But finally, there's a political imperative. And the political imperative has to do with the fact that not only provosts, presidents, chancellery recognize that unless CUNY took the initiative to respond to the City Council, to respond to the state, we were likely to have happened to us what happened to Florida. And I was in Florida at the time. Since the Florida community and senior colleges couldn't get our act together, the legislature mandated what we should do. We don't want the legislature to be intruding too much in the how we do our business. And so politically it made sense, became necessary for CUNY to do something before the legislator says, as happened in Florida, here is how you'll do it. It got so ridiculous at one time that the legislature was trying to have a common exit test. Once they get in, they're going to ask for more and try to be more intrusive. And so it politically became necessary for the university to respond proactively rather than wait and be defending and have the legislature say this is how you're going to do it. But I also want to take a half a minute to talk about some myths that are out there about the pathways. And myth number one is that faculty have not been involved in this. That's precisely a myth. Because if you look on page 43, you'll see the list of the working committees. If you look on pages 44 and 45, you're going to see the list of the majors committees. If you look on pages 46 and 47 of the handout that you got, you're going to see the number of consultations and discussion points held across the university. And that list does not include York, where Deb and colleagues convened a town hall last fall, where we had conversations at Academic Council, at the PNB. And so I want to have you know that any conversation you hear to the fact that faculty has not been involved, this is simply the administration ramming this down the throat of faculty, that is only what I say it is. It's a myth. Not only has there been those consultations, but there's a wonderful Pathways website where if you take the trouble of going, you will see not only the minutes of all conversations are posted, but there are feedback opportunities, and many faculty have used that feedback opportunity very productively. The second myth is that the Pathways Common Core will diminish the quality of what our students get. I'll leave you to peruse page 18 and pages 19 through 23 to see what the task force, mostly faculty, 4 to 7 faculty on that task force and working group, have said should be the learning outcomes, have said should be the approach. And so there's no diminution in quality. That is simply a myth. The final myth I want to share with you is, and I heard it at a caucus in the fall, that Pathways is a way for the university to get faculty workload to increase. It's not. It is still 21 hours if you're tenured faculty. It is still 24 hours if you're a substitute faculty. It is still 27 hours if you are an instructor or lecturer. What will change, and the conversation is now running wild in some respects on this, is the calculation of 3-4, where in some places, including York, some courses, English and some math and sciences, have 3 credits for the students, but for pedagogical reasons, it's a 4-credit assignment for the faculty. I think it's important that we not only understand what the truism is, but understand and be able to help to dispel some of the myths. It's my pleasure now to invite Dean Meletius to share his thoughts with you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Howard. If you look into the handout that you have, there is on pages 40, 41, and 42, there is a kind of a status update and a status report of what the pathways or of your college's participation in the pathways process. The pathways process basically started with the Board of Trustees resolution sometime back in June, and from that, a lot of other activities at the university level and the college level have been taking place. Our original participation was from a few faculty members that participated in the original task force, followed by Dr. Chirico and Professor Clovey to participate on the major committee programs. Then I was appointed as the college liaison for the pathways implementation at your college, and following that, your college had to nominate faculty members to participate in the overall CUNY pathways implementation. And those faculty members are to serve in the specific areas of the pathways implementation at the university level. In other words, they are going to be representing your college to the overall discussions and approval of the pathways courses at the university level. This is one aspect of our participation at the CUNY pathways process. Then we are going to have to develop and we are going to have to submit courses in the pathways process as your college. So we need to establish a process at your college which is going to comply with your college governance process, and at the same time is going to comply with the pathways established process, and is going to comply also with the CUNY governance process. To do that, we recommend that we parallel the pathways implementation process. Basically, to have like the pathways or the overall CUNY pathways implementation is going to have an overall committee of faculty which is going to be receiving courses recommended by the individual colleges to approve as part of the pathways. We will establish at your college a committee, a pathways committee, that is going to be receiving courses from individual departments that are going to be that will comply with the pathways recommendations or criteria. The pathways recommendations and criteria are the learning objectives for each individual area that were established by the early faculty task force. So what's going to be happening, courses submitted by the individual colleges to the pathways faculty committee of the university will be judged based on those criteria. Those courses will be submitted through a form that that CUNY Pathways has developed, and that form includes three basic parts. It includes the syllabus of the course, it includes the learning objectives of the course, and a rationale developed by the submitting college why that course should be considered as part of the pathways general education revision of the university. The same way we will do that at the college too. We will have a committee of faculty from departments, that is, nominations will be accepted. We will structure the committee, and that committee will be reviewing the courses that are going to be submitted by each individual department as part of the pathways. Either the required core, which required core of the pathways has English, mathematics, and life and physical sciences, or the flexible core, which is the remaining 18 credits of the common core. Then we are going to have the 12 credits, that's the college option, which also that your college pathways committee will be addressing and approving courses for these areas. In the next step, in order to save time, we will be submitting these courses directly to the CUNY Pathways Faculty Committee and also through the York College governance. If the courses are approved by the CUNY Pathways Committee, they will be following through our governance to be approved and be submitted to the CUNY governance after completion of the process at York College, which means York College governance traditionally is the curriculum committee and the college senate. In many ways, the work of the curriculum committee will increase exponentially because we are going to have to review, develop, design, or redesign a lot of courses. So we may have to increase the frequency of the meetings of the curriculum committee or the hours that we are going to be meeting. So therefore, we need everybody to focus on that, and everybody needs to fulfill the obligations and be as brief as possible for the submissions to the curriculum committee. Then they are going to be going to our Senate, and some of them, depending on the changes of the courses, may have to go all the way to the New York State Education Department for approval, or the process will end up just by publishing them at the Chancellor's report. If there are objections or if there are recommendations by the CUNY Pathways Committee, then we will try to incorporate those changes into the York College governance as the course is moving on. The timeline of this process is very, very tight. The university expects that the pathways review process will be completed by the end of the fall 2012. The reasons for that is to allow enough time for all the university documents to be updated and for all scheduling for the fall 2013 to be in place, because the pathways revisions and the pathways general education is going to impact the fall 2013 incoming class, first year class. So all this information, all these changes in general education will have to be published for the fall 2013 bulletins of all of the CUNY units, for your college as well, and all these changes need to be part of the schedules for the fall 2013. And as you know, the schedule for the fall 2013 or for every fall semester usually starts the previous fall. So right now, our Office of the Registrar is processing the schedule for the fall 2012. So around this time next year is going to be processing the fall 2013. But for all the changes that are going to be in the schedule of the fall 2013, they need to show up. They need to be published in the Chancellor's report before these changes can be put into the schedule, into the Office of the Registrar schedule. Therefore, most of the curriculum changes, most of the Board of Trustees actions need to take place by the holidays of 2012, by the holiday season of 2012. Given that the term is ending the first weeks of December, so everything needs to be completed. All your college actions, curriculum and Senate actions need to be completed by the end of the fall 2012, so they can be published in the Chancellor's report or of January 2013, and therefore we will be able to implement them for the fall 2013. I hope that everybody will do as much as they can to make this humongous task accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Militis. Let me offer 2 footnotes on some things that Dean Militis said. Part of the implementation plan by CUNY requires that every college submits its implementation plan by April 1. And I have asked the core group that we have, and these colleagues here are part of that core group along with Bill DeValle, Susan Letney. I've asked that we work towards having our implementation plan so I can have it to the President by mid-March. The plan is a broad map of how we will proceed. The plan is an opportunity also to request some money from the university with our implementation. So when we have our next core group meeting, which is in a couple of weeks, we'll be considering the requirements of the CUNY template for implementation plan so that we can put together something with appropriate consultations, and I'm hoping to have it to the President by mid-March so we can meet the April 1 deadline. Now, you will have heard also from the Militias, the workload on the curriculum committee is likely to increase. And I really want to make a special plea for participation, full participation by curriculum committee meetings. We have the misfortune, and it's not unique to York, that sometimes not only do faculty not show up or in a timely enough fashion, but our students don't show up. And so we have no quorum. Colleagues, we can't afford not to have quorum with this. We can't afford not to have York be part of the pathways. The implications for us are too significant. So I really want to put an initial plea for members of the curriculum committee and chairs of departments, and you know who you are. We need to just have due diligence and ensure that the curriculum committee meets, does its work, so that we can not be out of step with this. Delighted now to invite Donna.
Thank you, Provost. I decided if I'm speaking at one more convocation, I'm bringing my own chair next time. First of all, the charge of the psychology committee, please understand, is not the same charge as the core or flexible core, because our initial charge was to recommend or to suggest courses that students who are beginning a psychology program should take that would then be able to be transferred to any other college in the CUNY system. And after a while, our group began to realize that there was a bit of what we are calling mission drift in what was happening around us. And it seemed as if we were being compelled to recommend things for the flexible core or the original core itself. And I want to make it very clear that that is not what the psychology committee is suggesting. In your materials today on pages 38 to 41, you have the penultimate draft of what we will be suggesting from the psychology committee. And one of the things that everyone realizes who looks at a discipline like psychology is that it is a diverse discipline with many pathways within it. So what we are suggesting for students is a pathway that all students should take, which would then be accepted at every single college in the CUNY system. Now that's a very difficult thing to do because every senior college has a completely different psychology major. There are really only 3 courses that we have in common across the board, and that's intro psych, statistical methods, and research methods. The latter 2 courses are upper division courses, so we certainly weren't going to recommend those courses to students at the junior level. So what we have said is, okay, let's figure out what courses every senior college will take that does not require them to change their major in any way. I mean, that was really what we stated from the beginning, and that was how we proceeded. So in the end, the courses that we're recommending or suggesting fulfill that requirement. If you look at the courses, you'll see what we've also given is a menu option. And to my knowledge, we're the only committee that so far is doing that. And one of the reasons we have to have a menu option is because the senior colleges are so different in their psychology majors. And there are several pieces of this you need to be clear about. Again, we are not making any suggestions about the core or flexible core. That will come from the individual colleges. The individual colleges will need to decide if they want psychology at the introductory level to be included. The college has to decide where it wants to include that. We are not making any recommendation in that regard. Secondly, the other piece you need to keep in mind is that the core and the flexible core all have learning outcomes attached to them. We are also putting forward learning outcomes for the psychology courses. That means that while we are not saying you have to change the psychology major in any way, you will have to change the learning outcomes for these courses because they will need to match across the system. Now, the implications of that, or as the chair of the psychology committee likes to say, the unintended consequences, learning outcomes have assessment attached to them. So if colleges are currently appropriately assessing learning outcomes in their courses, they are now going to have to incorporate the learning outcomes we are suggesting to them. Additionally, if you include intro psych in one of the places in the core, you will now have to include the learning objectives that are being recommended by Pathways overall for the area you recommend that. And secondly, you're going to have to include the learning outcomes we're suggesting. So this means a tremendous assessment piece. The other piece that we wanted to stress, and it's actually in the preamble of our document, is that pretty much all of this is worthless without advisement. And that ultimately, students create their pathways by what they are told. And that means from advisors at local colleges, it means from high school guidance counselors, it means from classmates, it means from people they meet casually in an advisement center. So one of the big provisos we have put in the front of our document is that this recommendation has to be closely linked to advisement at every level. And for us, that means the language has to be simple so that not only students can understand it, but faculty can understand it too.
That's simple.
So, as we began to proceed, we began to realize, it has to be clear-cut because as we all know, there are going to be students who only go by the document. They may never actually go see an advisor. So we've tried to keep it clean, simple, and make these recommendations. The committees that have been established are in the forefront in that every discipline at CUNY ultimately is going to be given the same challenge we were given. So either through your discipline committees at the university level or through special committees through Pathways, every discipline is going to be asked to make the same recommendation. That is, name 3 to 6 courses that a student should take at an introductory level that they will be able to transfer any place in the system. So if you don't think that you're going to be impacted by this, you're wrong. So you're going to need to think about that. And I wanted to just, one comment that the provost made about faculty input. On the Psych Committee, we were given documents and we were asked to bring them back to our departments to discuss. And we all did that. And I have to tell you that one of the recommendations that's in the personality psychology course that's in your packet, one of the learning objectives came actually from Debbie Marowitz. So Debbie said, you left out something about talking about psychological assessment. So I brought that back to the committee, and it is now included as part of the learning outcomes. That process existed at all the campuses. So those learning outcomes were impacted by faculty at the individual campuses, the folks who teach the courses, who know what goes on in those courses. So it is important for you, as those committees take shape for your disciplines, to really have a voice and state what you would like to see there. And I think at that point, that's pretty much what I need to cover at this.
Great. Just want to stress 2 things, 2 footnotes on what Donna said. Learning outcomes was the overall approach that the University Task Force recommended. Can you imagine trying to figure out which courses to put in the package? And so the approach was, let's define what the students should learn first, and then work backward to see which courses may fit. And so it may very well be that we don't have that much work to do because we may have courses already in the books that meet those learning outcomes. But the learning outcomes were the driver. Advising. There are 3 provosts at every academic council university, one of whom is in front of you, who keeps talking about advising. And it is not simply advising in the faculty context. It is having the university make an investment in advising writ large. And so that conversation at the broader CUNY level about the importance of advising and really having the university put its money where its mouth is in supporting advising as an entity in and of itself. And among the things that each college is able to do in the implementation plan in bidding for some money is to say, we may want to spend some of our money on advising. We've got to figure out how to do that. Delighted now to turn to Robert.
Okay, good afternoon. I actually served on the Business Pathways Committee, and our responsibility were to recommend no more than 6 courses, actually no less than 3, no more than 6 courses that we thought business majors should take very early in their academic career. What we actually started with was accumulating all of the syllabi from the various campuses to see where we could have found our courses that had some type of commonality. Because what we were trying to do, again, pretty much like the psychology transfer pathways, was to not create any type of disruption for the majors. So what we did were to look at the courses where we had, first, where the courses existed on the various campuses. We came up with 5 courses that we agreed that pretty much all of the entry-level students in those programs should take very early. The courses were 2 classes in accounting, the accounting 1 and accounting 2. Then a course in information systems. There's a course in foundations of business management. There's one course in marketing that came up on the table at the very last minute. We were hesitant about at least including that course. We are still actually deliberating on that particular class as we speak. What we decided is the Foundations of Business Management course, many of the community colleges had that course. There's a few of the senior colleges that already accept that class. Here at York, we did not have a Foundations of Business Management. So in the business pathways, this is the only course we would have to actually create here at York. The other courses, we would have to modify, somewhat tweak the learning objectives so that they would be consistent with the pathways learning objectives. Some of the issues that came up, I'm not sure if the psychology program had that, were that on some of the campuses, their classes were 3 credit, 3 hours. Some of the community colleges were saying that to achieve or to pretty much cover the same learning objectives, they would need more time. In essence, they found that it would be very difficult for the students in the community colleges to be able to complete, again, the same amount of work at the same pace as the students at the senior colleges. We decided that was somewhat of a complex issue for us to address. We spent a significant amount of time debating how to address that difference. And what the resolution was, we will focus on the learning objectives, and later on, we will decide, or someone would have to decide how we will deal with the credits and the hours. So for example, here at York, we have the Principles of Accounting class is a 4-credit course. It's 4 credits, 4 hours. At Brooklyn College, the same class is 3 credits, 4 hours. And the question is, what if a student was to transfer from Brooklyn to York? A matter of fact, even some of the community colleges had even more hours. There's one community college that has the principals class having 5 hours. Right, so what we saw was that this was, again, beyond what we were charged to do. We were looking at focusing on the learning outcomes, making sure that, again, if the student were to take one of the 5 or 6, depending on whether we agree on the marketing class, but if a student were to take any of those courses, it will be able to be transferred to any other college within the university. Even as we speak, there are some schools that have that difference in terms of the hours and credits. A student who takes an accounting class at maybe Queensborough may get 3 credits. When he transferred to York, we have 4 credits for that same class. Currently, we will give that student 3 credits. So what we have proposed is not get involved with the credit and the hour situation. We'll just focus on the learning outcomes. So for us at York, what we'll be having to focus on is we'd have 1 course we'd have to create, a Foundations of Business Management. The only issue we had with that particular course is at some of the schools, this class is offered to non-majors, right? So we will develop that course. It will not require that we modify the major requirements. We'll have to offer the class. We don't have to require this class as a class that is required for any of the majors within the School of Business. Again, even at the committee level, we were not really sure about some of the issues. In our report, we identified what our concerns were, the areas that were not clear to us. Again, we know that there has to be courses, these courses should exist on every one of the campuses. The question is, do they have to be required in the major? And when we left, and our last meeting was last Friday, after that meeting, we decided that if we created that course, as a matter of fact, we would have to create the course, but we don't have to make that class a requirement for any of those degree programs. All right, so that's pretty much, what we had come up with. Identified 5 classes that would definitely be in the business pathways. There's 1 additional that we are still kind of on the fence with. Within the next few weeks, we will decide. And again, this is based on looking at the learning objectives and deciding if we'll include the marketing class in the business pathways.
Great.
Thank you.
The credits and hours issue is an issue that goes beyond business. It's a bugbear in English, it's a bugbear in the sciences, and you wouldn't believe the email that's going around just the last week from the various discipline councils and individual faculty on this issue. Delighted now to introduce Howard.
Okay, so I'm here as a team, and anything with Deb Swoboda, and anything that I say that's offensive, please complain to her. So the way we've divided it up is that I'm going to start with an exhortation, and then Deb will talk to you about some of the problems. My exhortation has to do with themes that both the provost and the dean have spoken to you about, and therefore I'm going to have to try to be very careful, which is uncharacteristic.
Well, you can try, Howard, you can try.
But I will try. The idea is the exhortation has to do with what some of you know as the serenity prayer. It's a brilliant prayer. You don't want to waste your efforts, as so many of my efforts in my youth were, trying to change things you cannot change. Now, I want to be frank with you. There are people working at changing some of these things. There are legal proceedings, and there are other discussions in which the administration is being challenged with respect to the role that it has taken in this. So people are working on that, and the Serenity Prayer also includes the idea, or I would like to add to it, to divide the labor and consider what you're doing and what you're not doing. There's no question that we have been presented with a task to perform, and that the initial decisions about that task were made by the chancellor and the trustees, not by us. And the dean has reminded us of a certain schedule. We didn't set that schedule either. However, the trustees did pass the resolution, and the chancellor did set dates, and now we have to meet. Now, one of my responses to much of the discussion, and I've been reading that email and doing very little else.
But meeting your classes and that kind of stuff, right, Howard?
Yes, I always meet my classes.
Good.
Never, I don't think I've ever missed a class. I'm never ever missing a class. But one one of the things that bothered me about many of the discussions that have gone on amongst the faculty, those participating in Pathways and others who joined in from the faculties of CUNY, is there wasn't always the recognition of what could be done at the college level. That is to say, CUNY set certain parameters for us, certain things that we must do, that is to say, create a common core of 30 credits, for example. But they didn't tell us how to do it. And the provost is right that the faculty did that. These learning outcomes were set by faculty. They weren't asked if they wanted to set learning outcomes for a 30-credit Common Core. That was decided for them. But they set the learning outcomes. We did it. And now the ball is here at York. And we have to decide which of our courses we are going to accept. Of course, as the dean explained, it will require approval from CUNY committee, but the York committee will accept the submissions from us, and there are many different ways we can do it. And if there are things that we think are vital for general education, for the Common Core here at York College, then guess who we must convince first? Us. Yes. We must form a faculty, not just a bunch of departments. Because it's not just a core, it's a common core. And that's my exhortation.
Thank you, Howard. One footnote on what Howard said. The CUNY approval process from the college, from the various colleges, also is a faculty-driven project. And it's a faculty-driven project in the context of review committees. And each of us at the campuses was asked to name colleagues for participation in those review committees. So let me tell you who are the York Review Committee members. For English composition, it's Cindy Haller. For math and quantitative reasoning, it's Lou Delato. For life and physical sciences, it's Tim. I think I see Tim right in front there. For world cultures and global issues, it's Fabiola. I don't know if Fabiola is here. Fabiola. For U.S. experience in its diversity, it's Bill DeValle. And actually, Bill DeValle has been asked to chair that committee, that university-wide committee. For creative expressions, it's Tim Amrine, and I saw Tim coming in, so he's in here someplace. For the Individual and Society Review Committee, our representative is Michael Flynn. And for the Scientific World Committee, it's Midge McNeil, and I know Midge is in here. So not only do we, at the various campuses, faculty get to say what, in the context of learning outcomes, we want to be part of the core, but for the review of the various campuses, the faculty are going to decide, does this proposal fit the bill in terms of the learning objectives and so on? And so again, when you hear a CUNY review, it's a faculty within CUNY doing the review. Deb?
I want to build on some of the things that Howard said, and to begin with the idea here that Pathways is a given, that we're going to need to embrace a process here that we build our Common Core for Pathways, but we also will be challenged to embrace some of the issues and controversies that exist within Pathways that the working in the steering committee debated, some would say ad nauseum, both in place and on email, even after the chancellor accepted the resolution. York will have to address and consider some of the controversies and some of the issues that exist within Pathways. One of those is the 3-credit, 3-hour prescription. If this prescription remains, and I believe it will, Courses clearly that go into the Common Core, some of them will need to be revised and revamped to meet that 3-credit, 3-hour ratio, primarily English courses and a number of sciences. There are exceptions within the Common Core, within Pathways, to allow for STEM courses that are more than 3 credits and 3 hours. But that is something that we'll need to address in our courses, and for many of them, they'll need to be revised and revamped. Another issue that was debated within the Working and Steering Committee was the place of foreign language in the core. And while that is not explicitly named as a separate category, the guidelines make it clear that a college, York, could embrace foreign language within a category or in a separate iteration within the additional 12 credits that the senior colleges can choose. We will have to decide whether or not we wish to include foreign language, and if so, in what place. Another issue that was debated within the Working and Steering Committees was the place of writing intensive requirements. While within the categories there are learning outcomes, I believe within most but not all of the categories in the flexible core that speak to the importance of building writing skills and reading skills. There is no prescription within the core that builds in writing intensive courses, but we have the option of doing that as a college. And the guidelines that are outlined in the documents that you've been given talk about the possibilities of doing that. We will have to decide as a college if we wish to build those in and how we do them. Another issue that we looked at was, a big issue was whether or not quality and standards would be lowered with the core. We will have to revamp and revise many courses to include learning outcomes. And I guess Howard and I would exhort you to look at courses that we include in the core, to design them so that we do raise standards, so that we do align the learning outcomes with the assessments that we use, that we embrace perhaps new pedagogies in the courses that we offer. Here's an opportunity for us to do that in a way that even builds an assessment, as Donna talked about, into our courses in a way that we could do widely and well. Here's an opportunity to do that. And finally, the last controversy that we're going to have to face is what up to additional 12 credits York College wants to include beyond the Common Core. We get to make that decision, and we will have to decide. It's not just a process of plugging in courses. We will need to decide what courses and how many we want to fit within that 12 credit parameter. So we urge you to work together. It will be hard work, but it's an opportunity to really revamp our curriculum in a way that raises standards and quality that will meet some of these concerns.
Thank you, Deb. Round of applause for Deb.